This is crunch time. I'm going to be pulled out periodically. I know we all are.
Are you pulled out before the committee was started?
Yes, I was pulled out, and I also will be pulled out probably in about 20 minutes.
Yeah, right, okay. So others aren't in the same position. So we have a quorum, and let's get started because we have a lengthy witness list. And
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
average 11
Voice
minutes
sounds
per
like
witness.
No, I'm not sick. I just, yeah.
So are we live yet?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much. Good morning. It is Thursday, April 14th, 2022. It's 8:40 a.m. And this is a meeting in Senate Natural Resources and Energy. We're taking the bill H518 and activating the municipal energy and resilience initiatives. We have the bill sponsor with us. Good morning, Representative Sebelia. Can you tell us what problem or opportunity you saw and how this bill goes after it?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Senators. 518 is a strike-all bill that expands an existing pilot program at Buildings and General Services, the State Energy Management Program for municipalities. The goals are to support increased community resilience by improving multi-purpose municipal buildings, to strengthen and create technical assistance linkages from our municipalities through to our RPCs to BGS, and to reduce emissions and carbon-intensive fossil fuel use in eligible municipal buildings. The bill incorporates municipal resilience priorities that have been articulated by several different entities. VLCT, who you'll be hearing from today, has worked with our cities and towns to develop a master list of more than 2,000 buildings, including what is known about mechanics, flood zones, and other measures of vulnerability. This is an impressive and exhaustive list of our municipalities. If you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to look at it. It's pretty impressive. The Vermont Global Warming Solutions Act that we passed required the Climate Council to develop a plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the state. Part of developing that plan included work by the Rural Resilience Subcommittee to plan and develop tools for Vermont's municipalities to use to adapt to climate change and respond to the Act's emissions reductions targets. As part of federal COVID relief efforts, funding has been designated to carry out critical capital projects directly enabling work, education, and health monitoring, including remote options in critical municipal buildings. So the House worked really closely with the LCT, Efficiency Vermont, the regional planning commissions, and BGS to contemplate the expansion of this program to improve several hundred of our municipalities' roughly 2,000 buildings. As we were doing that, Governor Scott brought forward a proposal in his budget that drew on the capital ARPA funds. It was called Resilient Communities, and it proposed several initiatives that the Rural Resilience Subcommittee had contemplated. 518 incorporates many of the governor's concepts into what we had been working on, and has been and was voted out of the House, as you know. The State Municipal Energy Management Program, which you'll hear from BGS, further on plans and finances weatherization and more fuel-efficient heating improvement projects in state buildings. 518 expands that program into municipal buildings, and the program has three basic parts: technical assistance at the state and regional level, small local grants for facilitating conversations and projects to increase community resilience, resiliency assessment grants. These funds will help communities assess the best means of increasing resilience, including reducing fossil fuel use and emissions, planning for battery storage, solar siting, and increasing weatherization. And third, it provides grant and loan funds to weatherize and reduce fossil fuel usage in buildings that currently have or are planned to provide public access to telehealth, education, and commerce services. That is really important. The buildings of these grants, these large grants, are intended to improve fuel efficiency and need to have telehealth, education, or the ability to work in them because of the type of funding that we had proposed this be used. It's the capital ARPA dollars. And those dollars, Treasury has a rule that says you have to have a space that the public can utilize for telehealth, education, and commerce. In addition to increasing overall resilience, decreasing reliance on fossil fuel usage, providing funding to offset the needed investments in municipal buildings can help expand access to critical services for all residents and help contain costs for property taxpayers. I'm not sure, Senator, how much of a detailed walkthrough you would like me to do through the bill, but I will also tell you that you have been provided a few changes that are suggested for your contemplation. And I'd like to describe what these are. They're actually not monumental.
Do we have those changes from you or from whom?
You have them from me, but I have worked with advocates and Efficiency Vermont. The commissioner has seen them. I don't know that they have an official position. I'm sure you'll hear that. Your committee assistant has them posted, and I believe you have them in print in front of you.
Does Ms. Wasserman have that?
Yeah. She does not have the last one yet, but I just received it.
It's on our website.
Yes.
Thank you.
So let me just tell you about those, because I know folks are gonna have to split. So conceptually, when we were working on this bill, we then moved, as I said, we moved the governor's proposal in. And the place where we moved, the governor's proposal had said, we want to look at communities, we want to look at everything in communities around resilience. And solar siting and battery storage and fuel efficiency and big picture. And we really wanted to make sure that we were investing in kind of major improvements in municipal buildings, potentially lowering property taxes, definitely helping to stabilize pricing for those that are relying on fossil fuels for heat. So what we did to work with the governor when he brought this in was to move the large picture, looking at all of the different ways communities might want to be resilient, to move that into the assessments piece. But to continue having these grants be really, the larger grants be specifically for heating improvements. When we did that, we transferred language over, and we now have had several iterations that we keep trying to get right. And that is, those are the third amendments, suggested changes that you will see, page 4, page 5, and page 8. And these are just making sure that we have the right language about what is qualified, what type of heat sources are qualified in these buildings. So that is page 4, page 5, page 8. And so we want to make sure that weatherization qualifies, that heat pumps qualify, that modern wood heat qualifies, etc. So that is simply what those last changes are.
So this highlights on renewable or electric heating systems.
Yes.
In other words, renewable is meaning you can't move from a less efficient oil boiler to a more efficient oil boiler.
Correct.
That's correct.
Correct. Yes. And then the one at the top, page 2, this is something that we've continued to have discussions with EGS and Efficiency Vermont about in terms of how to most quickly and effectively, both things, get these assessments out. This program is really designed to, as we've talked with the RPCs, not make a program available, but really go out to particularly our communities that don't have a lot of capacity and invite them to participate. We know that communities that have a lot of capacity they're gonna look at this, they're gonna say, great, we're in, we're on, they've got the grant writer, they've got people that are watching for these. Some of our smaller communities, Reedsboro, Stanford, Whitingham, these folks aren't looking for this. And, we're asking our RPCs to go out, invite them to have conversations about resilience and then work on these programs.
So that, in short, a way to address the whole equity, not every town is equally adaptive grant writing.
Yes, yeah. So, and we know the RPCs have these networks. We know, so we just want to strengthen that network. Not all towns have effective town energy committees. Some do, some don't.
Right.
But just looking to really strengthen that. We know resilience is going to be an ongoing discussion with our communities as we go forward. So would you like me to walk through the very specific pieces of the bill? Because I can do that.
With council.
Okay, so I think that is, I didn't actually finish explaining about the assessment piece. So the first piece here, we had asked BGS to put out an RFP. And the commissioner has made, pretty compelling arguments to us that that is going to take a long time. And working with Efficiency Vermont, who we know has a, pretty significant depth of assessment experience and working throughout Vermont. We have some proposed language. This is hot off the presses. So this top piece,
2B.
yes, Becky does not have this yet, but she is anticipating. I spoke with her yesterday. So that's what this language is. It allows BGS to continue to work with their existing vendor list, which the commissioner, I think, will explain to you, she can add to. And so that, I think, is worthy of consideration.
So existing retainer contracts equal the list of currently approved vendors.
Yes, yes. So that, I think, in a nutshell, is kind of very high level, the bill. What will happen as a result of this? Hopefully, we will have, this resilience discussion connection, as I said, strengthened between the state, the municipalities, and the RPCs, and see some pretty significant improvements in, a municipal building. I've had a number of folks that have reached out to me to say, my town garage, will that qualify? This will go back to the type of funds that were proposed. We've made several language changes in here based on the funding, and it says that the town must have or can create a space where the public is able to come and close the door and have a private telehealth meeting. They could do education or workforce. And so it will not, we know this is not, every building will not be eligible based on the criteria that we put forward.
Is this sort of upgrade available only for existing buildings, or is a new construction, or like maybe you're making an addition, but does it contemplate someone building an entirely new structure?
We thought about retrofitting and working with existing buildings. So
Yeah, $40 million is a lot of money, but not if you start that.
Really? Yeah, not for 250, or 200. So we figure at the max level that we had in here, which I think is that 250.
Yeah.
That's not 200 communities.
Right.
And, there's 2,000 buildings. So, we like the idea of a large grant, but we also like the idea of giving as many communities as possible the opportunity to, their main gathering space, be able to make that comfortable, fuel efficient, warm, cool, make sure that there's a safe place for the community.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Representative Greeley?
Just a comment, it is interesting to have such huge numbers and then trying to explain to constituents that there's not enough money for what they want. That you take this huge number and you divide it that much and it's not that much.
I haven't talked to the chair of PROS, in the last month, just seeing this coming, and so it's in the budget. The last number I heard actually was 35 million. I don't know if that's, a difference between House and Senate, but at any rate, there's a very substantial sum of money built into the budget for it. So that's good news for all. It's not a little slight. Okay, with that, thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you, senators.
Ask Ms. Wasserman to join us and give us a walkthrough of the bill. Good morning. Are you set up to do screen sharing so we could walk through the bill with you online on the screen? Thank you.
Yep.
And given our pace for the morning, which is a little ambitious, if we could do it at the 8,000 foot level. Not a line by line, not a line by line read through, but thank you.
Okay, are you all able to see that?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, great. So Becky Wasserman, Legislative Counsel. I will do a walkthrough of H518, which is an act relating to municipal energy resilience initiatives. So just an overview is that this bill is, as you heard, using federal ARPA dollars from the Capital Projects Fund to do a few, three primary things for municipalities. The first is an assessment of municipal buildings. The second is funding a grant program for municipal energy resilience. And then the third is creating a municipal energy revolving fund, which is a loan program that is similar to the state energy management program for state buildings and facilities. I'll, unless you would like me to walk through all the findings and intent, I can kind of, section 1 of the bill is the findings with respect to municipal energy resilience. And what this section is having some findings on the targets for the Vermont's Global Warming Solution Act and reducing greenhouse gas emissions and the heating of buildings, providing significant opportunities for meeting those targets. There's also a finding about the cost of fossil fuel heating and how that impacts municipal budgets. The fourth finding has to do with how an expansion of the state energy management program can help with meeting the targets of the Global Warming Solutions Act. And finally, the fifth target is that connecting the technical resources at the local, regional, and state level and expanding that SEMP program will help promote resilience and sustain connection to critical services for all Vermonters.
And just as you know, we've worked with the SEMP program several sessions running, so I'm guessing we're familiar with that piece of where we're starting from, at least. Thank you.
Okay, great. So section 2 of the bill is the assessments that you heard about. So these would be done where the current construct, it sounds like there's a proposed changes to this, but is that BGS would be issuing an RFP by September 1st of this year for a comprehensive energy resilience assessment of covered municipal buildings and facilities. Subsection B has the Commissioner of BGS contracting with an independent third party to conduct these assessments. And the assessment shall be completed by January 15th of 2024. So there's like a year and a half period to do these assessments. Subsection C describes the application process. So a municipality can coordinate with a regional planning commission to help develop plans, and submit an application to BGS to receive an assessment of its buildings and facilities. Subsection D lays out the scope of these assessments. So they would include a scope of work, cost, and timeline for completion for each building or facility. And the assessment would have recommendations for improvements that reduce the operating and maintenance costs, enhance comfort, and reduce energy intensity in a municipal building or facility. And that would include things like improving or replacing heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, using renewable energy sources for heating systems, but not recommending the use of heating systems that use fossil fuels, making improvements to the buildings or facilities thermal envelope. There would also be an evaluation of things like the use of battery storage and EV charging stations, potential for on-site renewable energy generation options. There would be an estimate of costs for each of the recommendations that come, and an estimate of system and equipment life cycle costs and consumption data. And then finally, the potential to phase the scope of work for that is being recommended for each building and facility. So the way the assessment would work is that BGS would establish guidelines for a municipality to receive an assessment. And these guidelines would require a few things at a minimum. First, that the municipality has access to high-speed internet. The municipality has to commit for at least a 5-year period to have or create at least one space in a building that is being assessed, that is available to the public to enable work, education, and health monitoring or telehealth. And I'll just pause there to reiterate that this requirement is in here because this is one of the criteria for the federal funding. The source of funds that is in this bill to support these assessments requires that this space is made available for the public for these 3 areas of work, education, and health monitoring. And then finally, the buildings that are being assessed have to be compliant with the ADA. And there is a definition here for covered municipality. And so that is a city, town, fire district, or incorporated village, and all other governmental incorporated units. And I'll just mention that it does not include a school. I don't see any questions. I'll move on to section 3, which is the grant program. So this, so we're moving from the assessments to the grant program, and this is establishing in FY23 a program to award grants to municipalities to make recommendations on the use of more efficient heating systems, as well as making the grants can be used to make actual improvements to reduce emissions by reducing fossil fuel usage and increasing efficiency in municipal buildings. The definition in subsection B of a covered municipality is the same as that definition in the assessment section. In terms of the administration and implementation of the program in subsection C, BGS would be administering the grant awards in coordination with Efficiency Vermont through the State Energy Management Program. And grants would be awarded for approved projects up to $250,000. And those projects could include things like weatherization, thermal efficiency, supplementing or replacing fossil fuel heating systems with more efficient heating systems, and any other expenditures that are necessary for the project to be eligible for funding under federal law and guidelines. And then there would also be grants up to $4,000 to each municipality to facilitate community meetings and communication about municipal energy resilience. In terms of the program design in Subdivision 2, BGS would, in consultation with Efficiency Vermont and VLCT, regional planning commissions, as well as other experts in the field, would design the program. So that the program would attempt to have it shall include a streamlined and minimal application process for a municipality to be able to directly apply to BGS. And a municipality would have the assistance of a regional planning commission in that application process. The program design would establish an outreach and education plan for regional planning commissions. There would be an equitable system for distributing grants around the state based on need and a system of priorities. Those priorities include, with first being the highest priority, that a municipality has a high energy burden, community needs, and lowest resources, which is a definition that can be found in Efficiency Vermont's 2019 Energy Burden Report. And then other priorities are whether the municipality has administrative support to apply for grants, geographic location, community size, and whether there's another division of the municipality that already has received a grant. The program design also would include guidelines for renewable and energy efficiency building systems, eligible criteria for covered municipalities. There is a requirement in Subsection D that BGS coordinate with other state agencies and entities to help provide grants to municipalities. And then Subsection E talks about the funding of the grant program, which again comes from that American Rescue Plan Act Capital Projects Fund. And then finally, I would note that Subsection F requires that a municipality that is only eligible for a grant under this grant program if they have received one of those assessments that's described in Section 1 of the bill. Section 2 of the bill. Section 4 is the appropriation for the grant program. So there's 48.4 million that is appropriated from the ARPA Capital Projects Fund. 2.4 million is going to the Agency of Commerce and Community Development for regional planning commissions. Oops. Not sure what just happened there. Sorry about that. To help with the technical assistance to municipalities. And there is an allocation of how those funds would be distributed to regional planning commissions. So 55% of the funds would be divided equally amongst all the RPCs, and then 45% would be allocated according to the number of Vermont member municipalities in each regional planning commission as of July 1st of this year. And then the remaining 46 million would go to BGS. There would be 5 million of that would go to hiring the contractor who's conducting the assessments. 1 million would be for costs associated with administering the grant program. And then 40 million would be for the actual grants going to covered municipalities. On page 9 of the bill, Section 5 is creating the loan program for municipalities. So BGS is authorized to provide financing to municipalities through the Municipal Energy Loan Program. And this is where this is trying to mirror the SEMP program for state buildings and facilities. So this financing would be available for equipment replacement studies, weatherization, improvements affecting the use of energy, resources, implementation of energy efficiency and conservation measures, and the use of renewable resources. The commissioner of BGS would establish the criteria and eligibility to determine eligibility for funding, including repayment terms, and a priority basis for selecting municipalities to ensure equitable allocation of funds, as well as the loan conditions that assure a municipality is accountable when they're receiving funds. The definitions in this section define energy efficiency improvement to have the same meaning as in the state energy management program. A municipality is also defined in the same way that it's defined for the assessment and the grant program. So this does not include a school. And then renewables and resource conservation measures are also defined in cross-reference to other areas of statute and defined in the same way that's implemented for the state energy management program. Section 6 of the bill establishes the revolving loan fund for this loan program. Subsection B says that the money in the fund consists of any monies that's appropriated to the fund, as well as the loan repayments made by municipalities. In terms of repayment, a municipality that receives funds repays the fund through its regular operating budget according to a schedule established by the Commissioner of BGS. In terms of fund administration, finance and management can anticipate receipts to the fund, and BGS would be responsible for maintaining records and of all receipts and expenditures of the fund. And then the fund balance would remain in the fund at the end of this fiscal year and carried forward. The definitions in subsection E are also cross-referenced to what is in the state energy management program. And then there's a reporting requirement that beginning January of next year, BGS would report to the Corrections and Institutions Committee and the House Energy and Technology Committee, as well as the Senate Institutions Committee on the expenditures of the funds from this Municipal Energy Revolving Fund, and also report about each project that receives funding and the municipality's expected savings. Section 6A is requiring BGS to come back to Ways and Means and Senate Finance in January of next year with a recommendation on a fee amount that's charged to pay for administrative costs associated with operating or administering this fund. Section 7 deals with the appropriation that is going into this revolving loan fund to sort of seed the fund. And this money is coming from federal funds coming to the state. So this is a different pot of money than from the assessment and the grant program. They are also federal funds, but they're coming from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So there is $800,000 going to the Department of Public Service, and as well as $2 million going to DPS. Those funds have not yet been received by the state, so they are, there's language in here that says that that DPS will report to Energy and Technology and Senate Finance on the total grants that were approved by the state and transferred to the revolving loan fund, but the expected amounts are what you see here is up to $800,000 from the Energy Efficiency Revolving Loan Fund Capitalization Grant, as well as $2 million from the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Block Grant Fund.
I apologize.
Sorry, was there a question? No? Okay.
Just a phone ring. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. Section 8 of the bill is amending current law that sets up the relationship with BGS and Efficiency Vermont, and it is expanding the program that they have for another 3 years. So currently is an 8-year program going to 11 years. And there's some language added that it's the goal that this program becomes a self-sustaining program at the department, sustained with annual savings from energy projects that exceed the annual cost to staff the program. And then the other dates in this language are pushed out from 2023 to 2027 to reflect this 3-year extension. And then Efficiency Vermont is providing funding for now 10 fiscal years under the agreement with BGS to support annual salary and benefits to operate the program. And then BGS and Efficiency Vermont are also agreeing in the language to adjust the funding committed to the program based on a joint evaluation of energy savings generated that exceed the annual cost of the staff positions. And then the other dates in here are all just pushed out another 3 years to reflect the extension of this program. Section 9 of the bill is positions for BGS. So there are 2 full-time limited service positions created at BGS in fiscal year 23 for 3 years as part of this expanded SEMP program. And those positions are funded by Efficiency Vermont pursuant to that agreement that's already in place between them. And then in subsection B, there are 2 more full-time limited service positions created at BGS to administer the grant program. And those are for 3 fiscal years beginning in fiscal year 23. Those positions would be funded from the $1 million appropriation for administrative costs those funds are coming from the federal ARPA Capital Projects Fund. And then finally, section 10 of the bill is the effective date, and the act would take effect on July 1st of this year.
Thank you very much. Now, I asked for a somewhat tricky read through as an 8,000-foot level, and somehow you intuited it just right. So,
great.
Any committee questions for council? All right. So thanks so much for the walkthrough. Very helpful. And with that, I'd like to invite to the table Ms. Fitch, Commissioner of BGS. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Jennifer Fitch, and I am Commissioner of Buildings and General Services. I've been there since 2017 as the Deputy Commissioner and became the Commissioner last year. I'm also a licensed professional engineer and had a focus in environmental engineering when I was in college. So it's definitely a passion area of mine. And I think this is the first time I'm testifying in this committee. So thank you. This is great.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me. So
we haven't seen many people in the last 2 years, right?
No, well, that's true. I will say that this being a new commissioner, it's far better to have you all in person than it was to do it remote last year. So I'm very happy to be here in person. So really what this bill is doing is it's basically colliding 3 different things at the same time, right? So as Representative Sebelia mentioned, we have a SEM program. Sounds like you're very familiar with that program, so I won't go through it. But about a year ago, we extended that program to not just focus on state facilities, but also focus on municipalities, because we are the leading expert in the state of Vermont on energy efficiency in buildings. And so it makes sense for us to expand our technical resources to municipalities to make those improvements as well. VLight and the Public Service Department has seeded this program by providing $300,000 over 2 years. Part of that is to hire, that's separate from this bill, but just a little bit of background. Part of that money is to hire up to 2 limited service positions for 2 years. as well as any additional money would be used to do energy audits in municipal buildings. We did not have any money to actually to support communities and actually doing any projects. Last year, the governor did ask for $10 million to seed that program, so we would have funding for these energy efficiency projects. Unfortunately, the governor asked for $5 million, the House moved it to $10 million, and it came over to the Senate, and it was reduced down to 0. So we still don't have any funding to actually do projects with municipalities. So that was one thing that was happening. Over the summer, Representative Sibilia was working on a fuel switching bill. So that's where she comes in. And then the governor proposed a Resilient Communities Center proposal for the capital Coronas project funds that we've been talking about. And basically what this does is sort of meld them all into one bill. I will say that it's not exactly what the governor proposed, and a couple of really important things for you all to understand. This funding is different. It's a pre-application process. That means we cannot spend the money until we've applied to the federal government and they have agreed that it meets all of the criteria for the funding. The specific criteria that it needs to meet is 3 things. It needs to be an investment that enables work, education, and health monitoring. What that means, these municipal buildings, whether it's a library or a town hall or whatever it may be, has to have a dedicated space for some member of the public to go in and then, pull up a laptop or a computer and have these sort of remote meetings, if you will. So it has to have that space. If it doesn't have that space, it will not qualify for this funding. It has to address a critical need related to COVID-19 public health emergency. So the idea is we had a public health emergency. We had people in the public who could not get services as a result of COVID-19. And then the third one is it has to address a critical need of the community served by it. So again, these critical municipal buildings and how they were providing support to the public during COVID-19. It must meet all of these 3 requirements or else it's not eligible for funding. So that's something important to keep in mind. And
sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to double check. So those are anded together. It's not work, education, or health. It's all the space has to
enables work, education, and health monitoring is specifically what the federal guidance says.
Okay.
And so that's really important. The other thing that's important to know about federal funds is there's usually other things we need to do. So you saw that they added language in about the American Disabilities Act. And that's because traditionally speaking, when you get federal dollars, that's something that must be addressed with federal funding. The reason why this is so important for you all to understand, and what we explained to the House, is that these other criteria will have to be met before we do anything related to energy efficiency. Because if we don't meet those 3 criteria plus ADA, then we don't have any money left on the table to do energy efficiency projects. So I just want to be really clear about that. And we have been working very closely with Representative Sibilia, and I think we've gotten the language to the point that we will qualify, but I can't necessarily guarantee it because again, it's a pre-application process. I can tell you that we're working obviously with the administration, and the administration is working with Guidehouse, and the goal is to create an application that will be eligible for funding. But that's something really important to keep in mind. The other thing that's important to keep in mind is, in my opinion, and I've been very vocal about this, and Representative Sibilia knows, the $250,000 cap for grants to communities, while I understand the goal is to spread the money around to as many communities as possible, and certainly the administration wants to support communities as well, which is why we pitched the resiliency proposal, I think you're going to find that that money is way too low. Because when we worked with ACCD recently, they said with the communities that they've worked with, it's cost an average about $160,000 to bring buildings up to ADA code. So if you're only granting $250 and you got to do the ADA, then you've already spent $160 of that $250. So that's a challenge, right? As well as if these buildings don't have a dedicated space, meaning you don't have a meeting room or a focus room or whatever you'd like to call it, towns will have to build one. And it's going to have to be available for 5 years, right? So to build rooms that you don't have, right, will add costs as well. So the administration proposed up to $1 million grants. We did work with the House. They raised the limit from $200,000 to $250,000. I still think that's way too low. And here's how I feel. I know that we love to spread the money around to communities. And again, we want to do that too. That's why we created this program, right? We want to get it off the ground. However, do you want to do many projects but do them poorly? Or do you want to do fewer projects and do them really well? So that's something that I think needs to be contemplated and considered. When we go and we do the energy audits and these resiliency audits, we will be back, right? We'll report back to you on, this is roughly how much this project is going to cost for these various communities. And this is their ability to borrow, right? To augment the funding. So if we can't address it this year, I'm hoping we can address it next year when we have more data and we can give you actual financial dollars. But I just want to be really clear that I think the 250 is too low. So there's that component. With respect to the compelling us to put out a new RFP for doing these audits, it makes no sense because we already have 4 vendors under contract that can do those audits already and do them in our buildings all the time. And they're already accessible to municipalities. It will take us 6 months to put together an RFP, put it on the street and have people respond and award those contracts. We don't have time because the other component to all of this is the money has to be spent, done, projects need to be complete, and we have to pay back the towns. So this is a reimbursement program. As towns do the work in their buildings, they will invoice the state and say, we paid this amount for this project, and then we will reimburse them back. All of that has to be done before the end of 2026. You got to get all these assessments done, right? Then we have to figure out how we're going to convey the grants out. What's the criteria? Then we have to give the grants. Then towns actually have to do the work. And here's the challenge. As you know, we've been testifying a lot in Senate institutions. There is a workforce shortage, and there's a big one in the trades field. And with all of the money going to housing, a lot of money is going to housing. What you're going to see is there's even going to be a greater demand for a shrinking workforce. And it is going to take a long time to do these projects because we don't have people ready to go. So that's just something else to consider. So what I'm getting at is we want to hit the ground running. Hit the ground running means utilizing what we already have under retainer contract. And Brian can speak more to that.
Okay, and that's the existing retainer contract.
That's right. That's on the first page, our ability, or the second page, our ability to, under section 2, our ability to utilize existing contracts, which again, we've been doing these. This is what we do in state buildings, right? We do them all the time. And we've got experts already that know how to do them. So why reinvent the wheel and add more time to the schedule? So that's my comment on that. With respect to the $2.4 million going to the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, we believe that that money should actually be redirected to BGS because instead of having 2 entities trying to manage a program, you have 1 entity managing a program. And that's far more efficient from an administration perspective. It makes sense to kind of have it all housed in the same spot. So, so if we could change that language, we are requesting that as well.
Have you presented that request to the House?
We did talk to them about it in the House and it didn't get changed. I'm not sure why. I mean, Laura might be, Representative Sebelian may be very open to that, but we just know that we have said it many times and it did not change, but I'm not sure exactly why. Notes here. And the last one that I just want to also make really clear is that there is agreement that Efficiency Vermont, we shouldn't be using Efficiency Vermont to pay for 2 of the 4 limited service positions that are conveyed through this bill. That being said, and we're supportive and agree with that, and Efficiency Vermont will likely speak to that today. However, I just want to be really clear that we need 4 positions. So if the funding doesn't come from Efficiency Vermont, then the funding needs to come from this funding or some other kind of funding. But the main point is that we need to have the 4 limited service positions to make this happen. So however the funding works out, we just want to make sure that we have the funding to do so. But agree that Efficiency Vermont should not be the organization that pays for 2 of them. They should be paid with ARPA dollars to the extent possible. So those are the high level remarks from me. Brian can speak more specifically. I will tell you that we're really excited too, in addition to the bill and the capital progress funds. I just want to say we thank the Public Service Department as well as Representative Sebelia for also giving us some seed funding for Municipal Revolving Loan Fund. That's great. We're really excited about it because again, prior to this bill, we didn't actually have any money to do projects. So we're very excited about that. We're very happy with that.
So the Senate got sort of bootstrapped by Efficiency Vermont funding the positions, as I understand, at BGS, right? To supporting positions in BGS in order to do the work. Does it still make sense? I guess I have a question sort of floating out there. To what degree does it make sense that they keep funding positions for a program that's becoming a statewide program?
It's an excellent question and something we talk about all the time. I will tell you that we have a great partnership with Efficiency Vermont. And as a result of that, we actually take a lot of work off their plate because I now have internal experts and technical resources internally. We used to always go to Efficiency Vermont every time we were doing a project on a state building. They would do their review, right, and advise us. So I think an argument can be made that it is justifiable for some funds to come from Efficiency Vermont because we're doing that work in-house rather than not having experts in-house and continuing to go to them, right? Because that would be a resource demand on them. But I also agree, right, with the climate action plan and where we're headed in the future, you know, we need to eventually make a commitment to the state energy management program. There's no doubt in my mind. It's about when does that take place in time. But again, we do reduce a lot of work on Efficiency Vermont's plate by having the internal technical experts and resources in-house.
Or establishing a fund to do the initial grants and then having it be revolving fund is a big step forward.
It's a huge step forward.
Well, great. So that's very helpful. Any questions from Ms. Fitch?
Yeah, I'm surprised that BGS has the capacity to do this. It seems to me you have more or less a full plate already, just taking care of the state and now reaching out to municipalities.
You are correct, Senator. We definitely are resource constrained internally. That's why we're asking for limited service positions through this bill to give us additional capacity. And Brian can speak, Brian Sewell, who's our SEMP manager, can speak more to the partnerships he's been creating as he's been standing up the municipal SEMP program. But Brian also has been working with the RPCs as well as the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, as well as Efficiency Vermont. So while we will be the lead, right, and obviously this money is being conveyed through BGS, we will have partners and we will be extending our staffing and our resources as a result of those partnerships.
Any other questions for the commissioner? Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you for, hopefully I get to come back and testify.
I'll
to your
be seeing you
committee
this
again.
afternoon.
Yes, thank you so much.
When we put together the agenda, we had Eric Hickhorn on the list. Is
He's here, but I think he feels that we're covered between myself and Brian, but he's in the other room. I'm gonna leave because I have a conflict. But if Brian can't answer a question, which I'm sure he can, Eric is right next door and can pop in anytime.
okay? Great, thank you for that. With that, then we'll go to Mr. Sewell. You joining us at the table, welcome. It's been a couple of years, I think, since we last did this. Good morning. So I think we have a pretty good sense of the bill and the program. Anything that you would like to fill in that you think is important for us to know?
Thank you, Chairman Bray. For the record, my name is Brian Sewell. I'm the State Energy Program Coordinator under BGS. I've been with the state just over 2 years now, so it's been an interesting 2 years. As Commissioner Fitch mentioned, we have been doing a lot of work on the state side and in the last year and a half to try and expand our state energy management program, SEMP model, out to municipalities. I will try and refrain from using the alphabet soup of acronyms as much as possible, but if something gets through and it's confusing, please stop me and let me know. For this bill, it's really important, as Commissioner Fitch mentioned, that we get the administrative support. She talked about our current constraints, and we still have our obligations to meet the goals for state facilities. But what's really exciting is the ability to take the model that we've built within SEMP at state facilities and expand to municipalities. And again, just high level, and you can kind of see how it's outlined in this bill as well. We start our process internally for state facilities with bill tracking. We use Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So Commissioner Fitch mentioned that we have, through some grant funds, through Public Service CDIP and Hvac, positions that would help towns who are staffing constrained do some of the grunt work of collecting the bills. Maybe they have them in PDF format, but they're not in a workbook, and they're not certainly not in Portfolio Manager. By helping them do that, we'll benchmark some of these critical facilities and come up with an energy use intensity number, KBTU per square foot as a measure of energy intensity in the building. We use that to rank our facilities. Worst performers are the first ones to go on the list for auditing. As mentioned, we have 4 investment grade energy auditors on contracts right now with the state. We have the ability to add additional contractors to that RFP. So I'm going to agree with the commissioner's comments that to go out for another RFP process would be redundant and I think slow us down in a time frame where we're really trying to get money out the door to towns as quickly as possible.
With the
And
existing set of 4, you feel like that has the capacity to pick up the pace and handle all the municipal requests that you may have to field?
yes, sir. I think at the starting point, 4 is a good number to begin with. As I mentioned, we can add. So if we start to see tremendous, uptick in interest in buildings that qualify, again, we want to work within the constraints of the ARPA capital project funds. But if we have a number of towns coming in and we need to add a vendor, we can do that. We have that flexibility, and so rather than trying to go out and start a process over again. I think additionally, we would get many of the same vendors reapplying and then saying, I'm not sure I understand what a resiliency assessment is. And they would kind of default to what we do already, which is an ASHRAE level 2 investment grade energy audit. Just again, broadly, this goal, the program expansion goal is to bring this out to municipalities. We're going to incorporate ARPA capital project funds and make sure that our application process meets those requirements. We're really pleased to have the gift of the grant funding from Public Service and B-Light to get this off the ground. So we do have some funding for positions and audits that's separate from ARPA and could be used before our initial project plan in September is finalized. So that helps us get going right away. For the other piece of the funding project side, Commissioner Fitch mentioned the process we went through last year, 5 to 10 to 0. This year, if we have the ARPA capital project funds, that'll really increase our ability to get this work done. But in addition, the creation of a municipal energy revolving fund, and we love our acronyms. So on the SEMP, currently we have SURF and SMRF, which are our 2 revolving loan funds that we use. This would be MERF, SURF, SMRF, and MERF. And this would really allow us to continue our work with the towns beyond the requirements of the ARPA capital project. So we really want to build a program expansion that's going to be here for the long term. There's a lot of towns I know that need help, and I have been very grateful for the amount of information that I've been able to learn through town energy committees, the VCAN group, and the RPCs, who I know will be testifying today. And we really look forward to working with them to try and bring the benefits of this program expansion out to towns. And our focus is shared with them in that we want to work with the energy burdened towns that often don't have the staffing resources. That's why staffing has been a big part of our push for this legislation. We want to be able to take the load off them and get this work done. So our worst nightmare would be to go put a bunch of reports out and have them go sit on a shelf. We want to get these reports turned into projects.
Okay. So I don't know if it's your question, not a technical question, it's a money question. So as the bill came over and the budget came over from the House, are all your is all the money there? That's a short way of saying it. Just to fund the necessary staffing as well as create the grant pool, etc.
Yes, so on the project side, you heard Commissioner Fitch mention a little bit about the cap of $250,000 not quite being enough. I support that same recommendation that we try and raise the cap. We do want to find that sweet spot of working with as many towns as possible, but making sure that we're not leaving any piece of the project unfunded. We are also working in discussions with the Vermont Bond Bank to try and better understand how we can leverage economies of scale within towns that work in different regional planning commissions. So one example would be if we're able to get 3 or 4 buildings assessed and it turns out they all have a similar light fixture that needs to be replaced with an LED. If we can get them to agree on a fixture type, we might be able to increase, the runway we have with some of the funds. But overall, I believe that we have the funds to make this program successful. And even if that means we do a smaller number of projects than we would ideally hope, if we do them really well, then we've established a program that will allow us to continue to build on that success with towns going forward.
Well, thank you. I'm always a little leery when we set caps so low. I mean, the biggest reason that this is private business, not municipalities, the biggest reason for business failure is undercapitalization. So who knows what what the right number is here. So any questions for Mr. Sewell? Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you, Senators. Appreciate it.
Mr. Kilcorn, we have you on the agenda, but I don't know if you have anything you want to add, or you're just here. It's like, you know, if anyone needs to dial a friend, they could call on you.
Mr. Chairman, Eric Kilcorn, BGS, you're absolutely correct. Although I'm flattered to see my name on the agenda, I offer no additional expertise beyond what's already been presented by the Commissioner and staff. So just for that.
All right, so thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to go to Mr. Riley, who's joining us on the screen right now. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Bray. Good morning to the committee. Thank you so much for having us. For the record, Dan Riley, Director of Public Affairs for Efficiency Vermont. I am joined by my colleague, David Westman, our Head of Regulatory Affairs, who's here in the phone a friend seat as well. I want to be very mindful of the chairman's directive that we have 11 minutes per witness, so I will try and talk very quickly. I do have a brief presentation that I can just run the committee through. I'm going to, if I could just have screen sharing capabilities, I can.
While that's coming on, good morning, Mr. Westman. Hi.
Morning, committee.
Just want to make sure everybody can see that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Again, thank you so much for having us. You know, as you've heard from several of the witnesses, you know, we do really believe that this is a valuable use of ARPA dollars, and that these are dollars that can really make a difference. You know, we firmly believe in municipal efficiency here at Efficiency Vermont. You know, it's not just about oh, excuse me, there we go. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's about towns saving money on energy costs, you know, freeing up badly needed funds for other priorities. Advance quickly, next slide. I really have three key points here today. You know, the first is that Efficiency Vermont believes that H518, with some minor changes, which I'll get into in a minute, is a strong bill that presents real opportunities. You know, as I said, every dollar saved on energy costs funds other key programs. Under the current landscape, it can be a challenge for small municipalities to access the right services. You know, this bill is a real opportunity to overcome that. You know, we do feel like it's addressing a problem that's out there. And our key change that we're requesting, as you heard from Commissioner Fitch, you know, we believe that program administration at BGS should be funded out of the appropriation, not out of the energy efficiency charge. You know, all we're asking is that this be aligned with other appropriations.
Yeah.
You know, okay, go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, so there's 4 positions. You already, the pre-existing SEMP, you're already funding. I don't know if it's 2 positions, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, and so this would be 2 becomes 6, is that right? And then are you on the hook for all 4 additional positions, or you're on the hook for 2 of the 4? I'm just trying to keep track of the moving numbers here.
Dave, correct me if I'm wrong. As the House passed version of H518, it would be Efficiency Vermont would fund 2 additional positions, and 2 of these positions would come out of the $1 million that was appropriated out of the ARPA funds for administration. Do I have that right, Dave?
That's right. And Mr. Chairman, I agree. It can be confusing, and so that was one of the points that we wanted to make in our testimony here, is that the 2 positions that are identified in the House passed bill for being paid for out of the Energy Efficiency Fund are written as an extension of the SEMP program and the SEMP assistance to BGS. And we do have a very active partnership with BGS. It's administered through an MOU. And one of the challenges that we've had in the past is that, for the host of reasons that Commissioner Fitch and Mr. Sewell just identified, there's a lot of other issues that BGS has to navigate in these projects, including funding streams, capital requirements, as well as other requirements to this specific ARPA grant funded program, which the commissioner talked about. And I agreed with the complexity of all of those challenges. And to really navigate that means that BGS is going to have to focus on a lot of other matters other than just delivering energy efficiency savings. So our approach here is to provide coordination support with BGS to make sure that the energy efficiency aspects of these projects are going to be completed. But our preference would be is that the administrative support that BGS will absolutely need in the form of these 4 incremental positions that have been talked about this morning, they should all be paid for out of that ARPA administration fund of $1 million that was appropriated in the House passed bill.
Okay, great. So instead of, you would stick with your current commitment of 2 people to the town. And the 4 new positions, you're requesting not to have 2 of them pulled out of EBT funding. So, Senator West.
Are these limited service positions?
They are, yes.
They are.
Yes.
So the question was, whether they're limited service? I don't know if you could hear. Okay, great. And approach will be getting into this more, but I thank you for helping us get the math straight on the way there.
Yep. Let me just run through a couple slides quickly and we can return to this point. This is the current landscape that exists for municipalities. Many of these entities that are identified here are on the witness list today, so I will let them speak to their services. Just to call out that we at Efficiency Vermont have 8 staff members supporting municipalities. We offer free walkthroughs, technical and project support, incentives, which I'll talk about in a minute. So certainly this ARPA funding would be building on existing programs that have proven to be successful. And we know they've proven to be successful because in 2020, Efficiency Vermont launched enhanced support for municipalities. And so I think this kind of gives us a real world out in the field example of the sort of the idea that we're talking about and what it could do. So in 2020, we provided $25,000 in incentives for 6 towns. You can see the towns listed here. These were chosen, using that energy burden report data that Ms. Wasserman referenced when she's walking over the bill. Of that $25,000 in incentives, towns will save a combined $167,000 over the lifetime of their projects, right? So we know this works. In 2021, we had 5 additional projects completed. The types of projects included lighting upgrades, heat pumps, and installing other efficient products in municipal buildings. I think that goes back to speak to some of the proposed edits that Representative Sibilia was referencing this morning in terms of giving municipalities flexibility in the language to pursue different renewable electric, different types of heating and efficiency projects. One quick example from the Village of Orleans. The Village of Orleans focused its efforts on upgrading its wastewater treatment facility, which uses as much as 10 times more energy than other facilities in the town. The quote from the town manager, this project was proof that when everyone works together with a common goal, we can do amazing things in a short amount of time. Love that quote, so I just wanted to bring it forward. So we do have some data points that this idea works. And with that, just really quickly, our proposed change, as we said at the top, Efficiency Vermont believes that this bill should mirror how most ARPA grants are set up, with the implementing state agency recouping administration costs out of the grant itself. We support the comments that the commissioner made previously in terms of the ability to use their retainer contracts to get this to move projects as quickly as possible, given the time constraints. We agree with their need for 4 positions here. And so, again, we feel that the bill will be most valuable if it does not detract from the PUC approved Efficiency Vermont EEC budget, which we've talked about in many different iterations before this committee. With that, I'm going to stop sharing, and Dave and I are happy to answer any questions.
Okay, great, thank you. Although it's easy enough to understand your requested changes, can you propose edits to the bill as they would appear so that we'll see precisely how they might be edited into the bill if we agree and support making that change?
Yes, I'm absolutely. Happy to share that with the committee as soon as I finish.
Okay, the other thing is, I think an earlier slide referred to a gas upgrade, and there was a question came up as to what is a gas upgrade?
I believe those are services offered by VGS. I don't want to speak for them, so let me check on that and I can get back to the committee.
Okay, thank you very much.
I believe that that's for covered municipalities within VGS territory, but I will confirm that.
Well, I think in part the question came up because as we were walking through with Rex Avilia, we're talking about renewable energy upgrades being the only sort of upgrade allowed, as opposed to sort of a lateral efficiency move within a fossil fuel type.
Seem too close to clean coal.
Yeah. All right. So any committee questions for Mr. Riley, Mr. Westman?
And again, sorry, Mr. Chairman, let me clarify that that slide was just covering the current, energy efficiency landscape that is available to municipalities. It was not necessarily going over services offered as a part of H518.
Okay,
Good.
thank you. That's helpful to know the distinction. All right, with that, I don't see any questions, so thanks very much for the perfect, informative and up-tempo presentation. We're flipping right along here.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, committee.
Yes, thank you. With that, we'll go to Mr. Poor, who I don't see on the screen yet. It may be that we're moving faster than he imagined. And then
Yeah, I think that's it.
well, no problem. We have in the on deck circle here, Mr. Gregory. So we'll pass over for the moment, Mr. Ford, and go on to Mr. Gregory. Good morning. Good to see you again.
I mean, before you start, I didn't recognize you between the mask and glasses. I apologize for not saying something.
That's quite all right.
I didn't recognize him until I walked by him.
There he is. There he is. We thought it was you, but it could have been someone masquerading as you.
Absolutely, it happens all the time. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for inviting me to this hearing, and good to see you all in person. Great to be here, and appreciate all the work you do in things that affect our municipalities. So I'll be brief. I want to thank you for your past support for energy planning implementation at the local level, which we're doing right now. That has enabled each of the regional planning commissions to hire staff. And it's a wonderful foundation that we have then for this bill. So the regional planning commissions have worked with the sponsors of this bill in the House and support the bill strongly. We've also been working with Efficiency Vermont for a number of years, and that partnership is strong and growing. The RPC role envisioned in this piece of legislation is absolutely key in my years in working with our communities and getting things done. Project management, whether they be transportation projects or FEMA projects or any community development, ADA, whatever. Most of our communities really need our assistance and hand holding to get things done. It's kind of small town retail work where it takes a lot of time to get from recognizing need to making decisions to move forward. So I think the recognition that we have a strong and important role in this bill is appreciated, certainly. So currently we're working with BGS on some of the preliminary thinking on this program, and we'll continue to do so. We want to hit the ground running. We certainly understand the ARPA deadlines and all, but we want to make sure we do it right. And we want to make sure that each partner has very discrete tasks, so there's no duplication of effort. And the way this bill is designed and the communications we've had to date and ongoing, we will ensure that that's the case. So I have just a couple of recommendations or principles I'd like to mention, and then if you have any questions, that would be great. As far as increasing the cap that has been talked about by the commissioner and Mr. Sewell, we could see some increase of that. I think that the commissioner mentioned the cost of ADA improvements as part of a package to do these energy conversion projects. It struck me as perhaps we'll have conversations, but maybe if ADA is not included, the cost of the project is a hell of a lot less. And that might be one of the considerations we have as far as eligibility. Just like ARPA puts some very strong constraints on what it needs. Maybe we say, this is not an ADA program, this is an energy conversion program, and we target it to those buildings that already are ADA compliant, but don't need that to be done prior to getting the energy conversion.
Are there funds available just for the ADA conversion portion so that this would be partnered and like getting this more energy focused grant at the same time that we might get the grant for ADA compliance?
There could be ARPA funds for that specific purpose, I don't know, but certainly community development block grants through the Agency of Commerce have been available specifically for ADA in municipal buildings for a very long time. In fact, we're working in the town of Heartland right now on one of those.
If you were to increase, so it sounds like you're suggesting some increase of the cap might be useful. Do you have a figure?
I don't. I certainly talked to my energy planner who has been working directly with 7 communities on implementing projects of this sort. And he says there are a lot of things that can be done under the $250,000 cap. I mean, if we're talking about heat pump installation, so a lot can be done. So I don't have a figure, but I would not expect it to jump dramatically from that, because my bias and the bias I ask you all to have is more community involvement in this program is better, because it spreads the knowledge and the interest and the understanding of the need to convert from fossil fuel. We don't want to just have high price projects to move the money. I know BGS does not want that either, but I think it's a gradation of how much of the cap we want to do. I would bias towards a lower cap increase than perhaps BGS.
Okay. The other thing is, since it's coming up, I think it's in part this has all been triggered not only by passage of GWSA and other confluence, and the SEP itself as a strong model that we've seen good results on year after year. And then, well, how could we grow that program? We're also talking about this as a community resilience feature. So, to what degree do you sense that there are communities that have realized maybe under COVID that they didn't have high-speed internet that provided public access, or whatever shortcoming it was, telehealth, telemedicine? And are you sensing that there's a lot of interest and demand for this kind of a facility in every municipality?
Absolutely. I think we've all read about the impact it's had on children's education, and certainly telehealth is continuing, even though COVID is receding a bit. So I think all of our communities are talking about their facilities and not only just energy savings and improving the property tax situation, but also for environmental reasons and quality of life for its residents. So I'm seeing a lot of that discussion. Yet to see a ton of investment in that regard, but we are trying to align federal resources, state resources to address the needs that we see are really blossoming at the local level.
Great. All right. Well, I've interrupted with questions. I want to make sure we hear what you have.
Yeah.
What do you say?
One other thing that hasn't been mentioned so far, and I might mention here, is that a number of communities over the last few years have done level 2 audits, good, strong audits. And we want to make sure that they could be used as long as they meet the standards of BGS and their work, so that they're not lost investments. So maybe those that were done in the last 4 years, or sometime that the experts say would be acceptable, that the bill would allow that to happen, not just new audits going forward. And I would say that no project should be funded unless there's some type of new fossil fuel-based heating system involved. I think that's really the point of the bill. And to the extent that we kind of get off into ADA and other aspects here, it's going to dilute the true purpose, which is to get off of fossil fuel at the municipal building level.
So I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. So no energy production source should be provided for by the bill. It's not non-fossil, if it's not.
Correct, and that's been mentioned by you earlier in today's testimony, but I just wanted to reiterate that that's certainly what we feel like as far as our ability to meet our greenhouse gas emission goals in our regional planning and in most of the communities that have done their local planning that you all have invested in. So it's the right thing to do.
And you're not suggesting that we fund projects that are not ADA compliant, is that we fund only ones that are? But that we not bring a project into compliance under
That's what I'm saying, and I'm not sure that prescriptive language in statute needs to be given to those of us kind of rolling out the program, but I want to raise the issue as one of the things that I think, we would be looking for to ensure that the money goes further for the, express purpose of energy conversion.
Okay. So it seems, I want to distinguish between, it sounds to me, so we need a lawyer in the room, maybe Mr. Sewell knows the answer for having implemented the project, that if we're using this money, which is federal money, that we have an obligation to make the space ADA compliant. That was my impression.
to make the space ADA, or just that it be ADA compliant?
That it be.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that can be done by either incorporating ADA improvements into the funding of the municipal project, or eligibility.
Yeah.
Our eligibility determination could be to those that are already ADA compliant.
Yes.
Or some mixture of the two to make the money go further.
Does it have to be already ADA compliant, or can it be, or could it also be that within the project, you were gonna make it ADA compliant?
I think the latter, I think it can be made that way.
Is it both?
Correct. So if a building is existing in ADA compliance, we can move forward. If it's not, we would need to
Make a
ensure that
plan.
it was brought to ADA compliance and
Yep.
then layer in energy improvements. And that's part of the reason why Commissioner Fitch asked for capital raise in
because
case that comes up.
there's still a few older town halls and stuff in small communities that could use some help with that.
Certainly, I fully understand that, and I support ADA strongly for many reasons, including personal reasons. So, we will certainly continue making progress on the ADA issue across the state. And then the final thing is, as far as where the Regional Planning Commission investment flows through, we're certainly fine with it flowing through buildings and general services. We have not had a relationship with BGS part of this, but I anticipate it being as smooth as it is with ACCD. So that changes fine.
Okay, so whether the money flows through entirely through BGS or it's split between ACCD and BGS, you have no dog in that fight. Okay.
No, I just it's just that the funding is there to support a planner in each RPC because that's certainly needed. So however it flows.
Okay, well, I appreciate that the bill is sensitive on equity, and my sense is that part of the way we achieve that is because the LPCs have that a level of relationship with all the towns, including the smaller ones that might be less capable of grant writing. So is that from your perspective one of the more important roles that you're playing besides the technical advice that you're providing?
Absolutely. We want to make sure, in my region, I have 30 towns. The largest is 10,000. Many of them are in the 300 to 800 range, and they have needs, and they have property tax burdens, and they have no capacity. Our towns right now are losing road crews and volunteers on committees. They're overwhelmed for a variety of reasons, like you can imagine, just the COVID and all the new funding sources, grant programs. It's overwhelming, and we try to truly calm them down and just say, these are your needs, and we will help you through it. And that's what we do.
Okay. You were talking about level 2 audits that are pre-existing, maybe up to 4 years old. Are you looking for a language change to make explicit that sort of a dating window for the audits, or have you talked to BGS about this?
I have, and I think I would defer to BGS on whether language is needed. That's just something that they are supportive as far as the program design. I just know that I had an executive committee meeting last night, and we have a town that did an audit of us, 6 months ago, and they're just concerned that they're gonna have to fight for grant funds and do it again.
So let's ask Mr. Sewell, while we're on the topic, can you weigh in on that?
Absolutely. So our internal process is that if a building's been audited within the last 2 to 3 years, we will look at that audit and potentially be able to move forward with that scope. So I don't see any reason to break with our internal processes and extending our existing program model out to municipalities. I think our concern, and I've spoken with RPCs and Peter about this, is that if it's getting pretty old, older than 3 years, you're really pushing it at that point. And we would, since we have funding available, say, I understand that you have done an investment grade audit, and we are really talking about an investment grade audit, not a walkthrough with an IR camera and I saw some insulation was missing. We want to be able to set the groundwork for measurement and verification towards getting an accurate project scope. So I think we would look at each case and give some flexibility there.
Okay, and what is it that makes an audit age? So in other words, more than 3 years old might not be up to snuff because equipment has changed or because technology is changing so fast. What age is an audit?
Yep, both. So we are certainly seeing a lot of equipment, excuse me, change rapidly. One of the fastest components is integrated controls, so integrating lighting and HVAC equipment. Some LED progression has happened over the years, it continues to happen. So, but I think the biggest space is in building controls, linking better lighting with the HVAC equipment. So in addition, if there was a blower door test missing from the previous audit, we would probably want to do that because that gives us a sense of how tight that building envelope is. So yeah, a couple of different factors.
Okay, thanks very much.
That sounds very good from my perspective. Thank you.
Okay, great. So put a check mark next to it. Sounds like we're all set here. Any other committee questions for Mr. Gregory? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you. And with that, we have Mr. Poor on the screen again. So we will swing back to Mr. Poor. Good morning. Thanks for coming back. You're getting your frequent flyer miles this week from this committee.
I was going to say the same exact thing. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but thanks for having me. And I apologize. I didn't realize, I thought I was on at 10:30 and I didn't realize the schedule had changed. Now that I'm looking at it, everybody's free. Maybe. So I'm glad it worked out.
This is like up-tempo basketball right now. So we're moving along. So thanks for coming back. No problem at all.
Great. Well,
518. Just wanted to hear what the department's take is on 518. If you generally, and if you have any concerns, questions, language you would like to propose to make sure that we're aware of that.
So generally supportive. We support and buildings and general services in this effort. I really just wanted to speak to two items in the bill. The first is I think it's section 7, which is the State Energy Management Program appropriation. And just explain that a little bit. I'm not sure if you've heard of how much you've heard about that piece of it. It's a little separate from the Community Resilience Center's kind of writ large effort, but it is related.
Okay.
So the State Energy Management Program was created a number of years ago. I won't know the exact date, but by Buildings and General Services. I think you've heard about that and are aware of it. And then there was a desire. So after the 2016 energy plan, there was a desire to expand this to municipal and potentially schools, the State Energy Management Program. And we've since then been working on that and to support expansion of the State Energy Management Program. We've established in 2021, last year, a pilot where we had Clean Energy Development Fund funding and VLIGHT funding to kind of get it off the ground and actually put the pieces in place to move that expansion forward and provide services to municipalities. Really that, again, in that was described in the 2022 energy plan as trying to move that forward. The appropriation in the bill here is, it's a little bit awkward. It's fine. So I just want to explain it though. There's infrastructure. The federal infrastructure bill is coming to the department, allocates money to the state energy program, which the
but I
Department
can't speak right now. Could you call me back? Oh, God. Oh, wait a minute. Let me turn the sound off.
Sorry.
Okay.
Is it possible to mute? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I don't know how long this has lasted. It's a Senate hearing up in Montpelier.
Miss Bruce, I'm not sure if you could.
And right afternoon, could you call back sometime this afternoon, like maybe before? Yeah, this is important because you're going to schedule something.
I'm sorry. Is it able to mute Miss Bruce there from?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Miss Bruce?
Okay. I think we're there.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have some dissonance and I have trouble with background noise and not able to talk over it. So the infrastructure bill allocates money to the state energy program to states, and the Department of Public Service acts as a state energy program. So we will be receiving by a formula approximately $750,000 to be used for a revolving loan fund. And also under the Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant Program, which is a program that we implemented in the ARA days. We will be getting between $1.5 million, maybe $1.7 million to issue as grants for energy efficiency projects. And our plan has been to allocate this to the SEMP expansion. We should be getting that money sometime this summer. So this section 7 is, this is why I said it's fine. I said it's a little awkward because it's allocating kind of federal funds that are allocated to our department, to the state energy program. But we were planning on doing that anyway. So it's fine language for us. We're not worried about it, but I just wanted to explain the concept so that you guys had that in mind.
Thank you. It was a little confusing on the way through first time, so that's helpful.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to point out, and I think it's in section 9, is that the program, the ARPA funded program here, the Community Resilience Centers, in section 9 allocates Efficiency Vermont resources to kind of administer or pay for limited service positions. And I think those positions are needed, and BGS can speak to that, and probably has spoken to that, but it doesn't make sense to the department to have that be electric ratepayer funded services for the community resiliency centers. So we would suggest keeping the positions, and they're ARPA funded programs, and that ARPA should pay for those positions.
I think before you came on, Mr. Riley and Mr. Westman walked through that with us.
Oh, okay, great. So I guess we support that. Or we support what Efficiency Vermont had said, as long as, and again, just reiterate, I think that the positions, well, I would defer to Buildings and General Services, but in my conversations with them, those positions are needed to implement the program, and so it's not the positions, it's just where the funding is coming from. So.
Okay, great, that's helpful. Anything else in the bill or program?
No, those are the only two things that I was hoping to speak to today. So available for any questions from you all.
Well, thanks for, helping step this up in the last year with the CEDF and VLIGHT funds, because it seems that we're establishing a pattern here over the years of we pilot something in a certain way, and then we usually have to cobble money together to pilot it, and then we see the value of it, and then we make an outright allocation and commitment to it. So thanks for getting the ball rolling.
Yeah,
Alright,
that's exactly what those clean energy development funds are for in my mind. So I'm glad they've been put to good use.
Any committee questions for Mr. Ford? All right, thanks again for joining us, and we will go on now to Ms. Bruce, Sarah Bruce.
Thank you all.
Good morning, Ms. Bruce.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'm just getting on the camera. Okay.
So we're, as you know, we're taking testimony this morning in 518. You're on the Heartland Energy Committee. And
Yes.
are you involved in a project that might be supported through this bill if it were to move forward?
Yes, absolutely. And I believe I understand that is why I was asked to speak.
Yes,
So
please.
again, for the record, my name is Sarah Bruce, and I am a resident of Heartland, Vermont, and I am currently the chair of the Heartland Energy Committee. I thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this meeting in support of Bill H518. I hope I can provide you with one specific example of the challenge of fuel switching of your municipal building or buildings in a relatively small town. Heartland has 3,600 residents. About a year ago, our town manager asked the Energy Committee, for recommendations for repair or replacement of the library HVAC. The current HVAC is forced air furnace with oil burner and 4 exterior air conditioning condensers. The immediate concern is that the air conditioner condensers are expected to fail in the next few years, maybe on the order of 5 years or less. The Energy Committee recognized right away that this would be a 2-step process because we already knew the building needs a good bit of weatherization work before you could really even properly design a new HVAC system. The need for weatherization was clear based on infrared photographs from 2011 and also a 2018 energy audit. That 2018 energy audit provided a proposal for what to be done with a cost of $32,000. This was considered too expensive by the select board, in part because the payback was very slow. Efficiency Vermont had calculated a 10% savings in heating energy costs with a payback of only $375 per year. And on a $32,000 investment, this was too slow and no action was taken. We repeated an energy audit last spring. The results were very similar and the recommendations were similar. Plus, we took a series of infrared photographs this past February in beautifully cold weather, so you could really get good results. And this demonstrated additional very significant problems that actually were not identified in the audit that was done in the spring of 21. And these problems are heat loss from the foundation all around the building, evidence of improper packing of insulation between the wall studs, and gravity settling of insulation at the top of the walls under the eaves. So we now have information on the building, and the town is now capable of developing a weatherization insulation work scope and getting some estimates. This weatherization work is likely to be much higher than that 2018 estimate of $32,000. Because that foundation insulation work really basically means, from what, as I understood it, and from some people I work with that know a lot more about building energy than I, the building really needs a deep energy retrofit, and that can be very costly. This is where we are right now. Unfortunately, the Energy Committee doesn't have the authority to call for estimates. And that is a bit of a challenge because we can't really weigh the pros and cons quite as well as we could if we had numbers. But we're working as best we can, and then hopefully convince the town to really pull in the estimates and get working on this. Once weatherization insulation plans are finalized and the expected reduction in heating cooling load is known, then the new HVAC equipment can be correctly sized to meet the new load as opposed to the current load. And I know you all know that oversized equipment will not only cost more upfront purchase, but is less efficient and will be more expensive to run for the life of the system, which 20, 30, or possibly more years. In terms of the HVAC repair replacement, the Energy Committee sees two options. The first one is just replace the condensers. The oil heat is evidently, it's a pretty good system. It is 25 years old or so, has 89% efficiency, and it's a high quality unit to start with. So replacing just the condensers could involve maybe 20, 30, maybe a bit more, $1,000. And this option would keep us on oil heat and just replace the condensers. There are some other concerns here and possibly increased costs because the current condensers are on R22 refrigerant, that is Freon, and this has been phased out and replaced by R410A, and that operates at higher pressure. That change in the operating pressure requires additional modification of the current system. And I have also now recently found that R410A is also scheduled for elimination from new systems starting in 2023, so next year. So that's the one option. But from the perspective of the Energy Committee, we really much prefer the second option, and this is what we're going to recommend. And that would be, after the weatherization, an upgrade and fuel switching. This, of course, is going to cost several times more than just replacing the condensers, air conditioning condensers. This would keep the current oil burner for backup heat in the winter, but could potentially drop use of oil by 80–90%. That's an estimate, rough estimate. But we would switch to cold climate air source heat pumps for heating, cooling, moisture control, very important in a library, and also air quality control, including CO2 sensors and a VOC or volatile organic compound sensors, as well as MERV13 filtration. That, of course, addressing the issue of the pandemic and potentially future pandemics or other public health emergencies. And there may be additional costs for electrical work or other things that need to be done. But I think it's at least 3 times more expensive to do that than just replace the condensers. Now, as I said, we're a little bit, one hand sort of tied behind the back because we don't have specific numbers, but I do have some verbal estimates, including from a mechanical engineer. So people who know more than I do about this. To consider the pros and cons of these two things, we looked into life cycle costs and environmental social costs. Even without firm estimates, it's pretty clear fuel switching is going to have higher upfront costs, purchase and installation. However, the option is expected to cost less over the lifespan, 20, 30, possibly more years of the equipment. So the return should be greater, the return on the investment. And then most importantly, this approach, the financial return of this approach will be amplified by environmental benefits and social. Reduction in fossil fuel consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. This is something we're all focused on. Improved air quality with those sensors and the MERV13 filtration. This, of course, improves the conditions for patrons and staff, as well as increased resilience in the event of another public health emergency. Importantly, this option is consistent with Vermont's comprehensive energy plan, as well as a Heartland climate resolution that was approved by 75% of the Heartland voters this past March. Lastly, in my opinion, there is the potential for a very positive effect from the town leading the way in a mindset change needed in Heartlanders to be able to really succeed in mitigation and perhaps also adaptation to climate change. Fortunately, our library is our 35-year-old library building is perhaps the simplest municipal resilience challenge in Heartland. There are at least 7 other buildings, many of which are larger and some of which historic. Town hall. We have energy audits on about half of these and hope to complete the audits on the rest by next winter. These have all been paid for by the Energy Committee budget. And I have learned this morning more about levels of energy audits. So I'm beginning to wonder about what level we really have. But we do have some energy audits. But based on these audits we already have, I expect most of our buildings will need significant amount of work, particularly weatherization, even before we can consider fuel switching.
Ms. Bruce?
Yes.
I have a question for you. So this bill 518 requires the grants will be available to folks who create a public space that enables work, education, health monitoring, or telehealth. Is your library project going to be the building that will bring together, be able to meet those grant requirements?
Yes, I heard those 3 requirements on a speaker before. I'm not sure I have them all clearly, but one was education, and clearly I think a library focuses on that. Our library does have a lot of programs, after-school programs for children and programs for adults, and there is a community meeting room, which we haven't used for the last 2 years very much, but previously we used a lot, frequently referred to as Heartland's living room. So in terms of education and community use, I think it's very high. The other one was the health issue. Am I correct? The second one was the health issue.
Right. So health monitoring or telehealth, a space in which someone could have basically a doctor's visit, I think. Remotely,
well, I would say a library is not probably the appropriate place for that. Does it require that the space satisfies all 3 of those items or 1 or 2 of them?
All 3. So that's part of why I was asking. And we don't know the program inside out and backwards. BGS and your regional planning commission can provide more technical information on the bill, but I just wondered if, in terms of you speaking to us about 518, if you were talking about the library, because that seems like the space you would most be likely to use to make an application to the program that's being created by 518.
Yes, I would agree with that. However, when I read the bill as it came to you from the House, I certainly did not see those 3 criteria. I heard about them this morning. I look at the various buildings that we would need to work at in our town, and I cannot really, I don't think you would have doctor's visits in town hall, in the recreation center. Now, the recreation center does have exercise classes, so that might be contributing to a health issue, but it doesn't necessarily have education, not in the same sense as the library. And, then some of the other town buildings, I don't think, and maybe I just don't know enough, but I can't see any, or at least 1 or 2 of them satisfying all 3 of those requirements, which, as I said, I just learned about this morning.
Sure. Well,
so that presents a real problem, because I, of course, thought that age 15 was a wonderful idea, because I thought it was something that would allow the town to be able to do something that it could not do on tax base only.
Well, I think it will, but I think So we're not in a good position as a committee hearing the bill to interpret what, the actual requirements on the ground are. For instance, what sort of space would satisfy the telehealth provision? It might just be a room where you close the door and someone's on, a computer monitor having a conversation with a physician, that kind of thing. But so I would encourage you to work with your RPC. So that would be Peter Gregory. Would that not?
Well, I don't know that name, but the Energy Committee is just finishing and will submit to the town a proposal for the library, weatherization and fuel switching, and that should be there in the town by next week. And Stephen Bauer at Two Rivers Regional Planning Commission did read the proposal, so he knows what we're doing. And he thought it was an initial proposal, and there were some comments. Unfortunately, his comments didn't get to me before the last Energy Committee meeting, so they weren't incorporated. But he didn't have any major criticisms of what we were trying to say. So I can work with him. I don't know the other person's name. I'm sorry.
No problem. Peter Gregory is the executive director.
Oh, yes. Okay.
The director of Two Rivers Hvac Regional Planning Commission. You're already connected to the right organization, and they can assist. It also sounds like
I don't. Is that? Excuse me. Is that the group that intermunicipal energy program with Jeff Martin? Are you referring to that?
I don't know Jeff Martin, so I'm sorry, but if you're working with Two Rivers Hvac RPC, you're with the right people in terms of helping sort out your eligibility for the program and which building might be the best one to propose, et cetera. It also sounds like you've done a lot of very thorough work in investigating your building already. So it's helpful to hear from the front lines what you have to go through to get ready. So thank you for that.
Okay. But I mean, I'm already in contact with Two Rivers, so I will get back to that and maybe ask to speak to other people. But there is a person, his name is Jeff Martin at Two Rivers, and he works with a group of towns on energy issues. But the towns have to sign up for that, and Heartland declined to participate. So I don't really have access to that. I think he works with about 6 or 7, maybe 8 towns.
Well, thank you. So thank you very much for your testimony today. Help us understand what you're doing down there. And we hope that it sounds like you've got a great project going on, and hopefully you're able to pull it all off.
Well, that's what we're hoping too. Thank you very, very much.
Okay, thanks again.
Good to see you, Sarah.
All right. Hi, Dick.
With that, we will go to Ms. Horn, who's with us in her garden. Good morning.
Good morning. I wish I was in my garden that it looked like that by now. Thank you so much for having me. My name's Karen Horn. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy at the League of Cities and Towns. And one of these days, I'm going to join you in person. So, which may be a promise and may be a threat. I don't know.
We miss you.
Thank you. So we're extremely grateful for the committee in taking up H518. It's a bill that would put real targeted resources towards auditing municipal buildings, expanding the SEMP program on energy efficiency improvements, renewable resources, and switching fuel sources to municipal buildings. We strongly support the legislation, and we think it's a game changer for cities and towns around the state. I did want to mention that in early 2019 and 2020, we discussed the potential for an expansion of the SEMP program to municipalities with both Efficiency Vermont and the Department of Buildings and General Services. A locally focused program would have been welcomed at that time, but there just weren't the resources to implement something like that. H518 would change the conversation altogether. It would assure access to reliable information, which is one of the issues for towns when you go out to the internet and look at all the information around energy efficiency, retrofits, like where do you start? Who do you believe? What's the most reliable source? So that would be a big advantage. It would provide technical assistance, the energy audits of buildings, financing municipal heating system conversion projects, and also addressing the requirements to provide space for the public to conduct work, education, and health for 5 years. So I did want to pause there for a second. We have a list of buildings that are insured by our property and casualty insurance fund. There's about 2,000 buildings on that list. Not all of them would be buildings that you would want to necessarily do energy retrofits on because they're used seasonally or something like that. But also the requirement to have a dedicated space for 5 years so that people can conduct work, education, and telehealth services would reduce that subset would reduce that to a much smaller subset of the list. And in my testimony, I provided a link to the list, which is on the House Energy and Technology Committee website right now. So given the funding constraints that you've had, the conversations that you've just had, we think that focusing on those municipal buildings that could provide that space for a period of 5 years is probably going to get you a larger group of buildings than actually there's funding to fix, for lack of a better word. So that requirement is because of the capital projects federal requirements. Peter mentioned maybe confining the funding also to towns that had already implemented ADA improvements. I think that might be a restriction that would cut out a lot of smaller towns that might otherwise be eligible for this kind of funding. So I'm not sure that would be the best idea. We really do want smaller communities that wouldn't have the resources otherwise to be able to participate in this program. And as you can tell, it's going to be a little bit of a fine line because of the requirements to have space for telehealth education and remote work. We think that a lot of libraries would certainly qualify. A lot of town offices, if they have a small separate room that could be set up with a desk and Wi-Fi, that might qualify. I do tend to agree that I wouldn't conduct my telehealth meeting in the town hall or the library, but somebody might want to do that.
A quick question on the EDA piece. How difficult is it for municipalities currently to find money like community block grants that Mr. Gregory mentioned to just do the ADA upgrades in and of itself?
Yeah, I think that finding dollars to just do ADA upgrades is difficult. I know that towns have worked ADA improvements into projects that they're doing for instance, with the community development program. If you've got if you've got buildings where retail is going to be put on the first floor and apartments on the second floor, that you would put in an elevator. Elevators are very expensive. But I'm not really familiar with a program that just funds ADA. And it has been a requirement for a very long time, as you know. So not that my knowledge of all the grant programs is exhaustive. And when you look at the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, there are so many new programs in that legislation that we don't know what the parameters or requirements are yet, or what the possibilities are. There might be something in that legislation.
Okay, the other question that's come up is the maximum award amount. There was a bit of a discussion between larger awards to do a deeper retrofit on fewer projects, or keeping the number lower and getting to more projects in total. Do you have a thought on that one, the $250,000 cap?
I don't have a good answer for you on the exact dollar amount, but I would concur with Peter that I think it's important to be able to do a reasonable number of projects, and to demonstrate that in all sized communities, you can make these improvements and they do save you money and they do affect your carbon footprint in a positive manner. And it also is a demonstration to your citizens that this is something that needs to happen and the town is going to lead on it. So I would opt for allowing for more projects, and maybe you don't do the whole 9 yards all at once.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I did have one specific comment on the bill. On page 2, it's section 2, sub C. It says that with respect to applications, a covered municipality, which my understanding is it's all municipalities essentially, covered municipalities in coordination with the Regional Planning Commission that shall assist, shall submit an application. There are some towns that can do this on their own without going through the Regional Planning Commission. And I think that the legislation should allow for that. It will conserve resources at the Regional Commission and allow them to help more towns that actually need that assistance. But there are certainly communities around the state that have the professional capacity in-house to put this together. So I would recommend that you allow for that option.
All right. As a help to the committee, could you look at that language and submit a proposed change? It will help us track the change, and it will help us make sure that we get the words right as we consider possible edits.
Yeah, I would be happy to do that.
Okay,
I did want to make one point with respect to the list of insured buildings. It does not include South Burlington and Burlington, which is, of course, a lot of buildings, but we don't insure them, so they're not on our insured list. So just so you know that the actual list of how many buildings are out there is larger than what's in the list that we provided to the House Energy Committee. And then, yeah, I think those are the keys that I wanted to let the committee know about. I'm really grateful that Sarah was able to join you to just put this in context in terms of some of the challenges that you face when you're looking at older buildings, which are most of our municipal buildings, and trying to address the pretty wide range of needs that come up, a lot of them unexpected. So thank you.
Good, great. We have a lot of beautiful older buildings, and they're not so easy to work on.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us this morning. And
Thank
with
you.
that, we're going to go to our last witness of the morning before we take a brief break, and that is Mr. Hook. Senator McDonald, could you introduce your constituent?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. David Hook represents one of the smallest of communities here in Vermont. It's located between the valley towns and its county seat. It's a small town that has always tried to economize and join other municipalities in saving money. And they are looking at this legislation, ready, eager, and willing to take advantage of it as they craft a new building for their health and fire departments and garage. And he's perhaps the second witness to testify this morning that's a volunteer on his own time and not being paid. I want to just also say that Berkshire has worked as part of an interstate school district to save money, and Hope has school district towns on both sides of the river. And this is an opportunity for one of our smallest towns to meet the goals of its citizens. Thank you for being willing to speak this morning, David.
Well, thank you, Senator Mark, and thank you, senators, for letting me speak today. I really appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, I think Senator Mark pretty well described the situation, and so we have a really essentially failed town garage. It nearly got washed out by Hurricane Irene. It's in terrible condition, and the town is on the verge of having a bond vote to replace this garage. We also have a quite overcrowded town office that needs, more space for our listers and so on and so forth. And we are definitely, I serve as the chair of the Energy Committee. I worked on the garage project before. I'm a building contractor, so I'm familiar with some of these issues in practice. The thing is that, so with regard to the town garage, we are trying as an energy committee to persuade the town to consider, and the architect for the garage urged them to consider, an air-to-water heat pump system for the primary heating of the building that would go into a radiant slab and use, the fundamentals are to make the building resilient, well insulated, and so on and so forth. And then to be able to make it so that it could accommodate actually a couple of different heating system options, whether it be fired by propane or whether it be fired essentially by these heat pumps. And so they're studying this question and need to make a decision. But it's obvious that the upfront cost of doing this, especially if you include solar on the roof, which is what would really make the thing work and make it a really low cost solution in the long term, is going to be significant. And getting the town excited about spending that extra money is hard. And even if they can see the demonstration, to be able to get some outside help to support doing this would make a lot of sense. So I've been hearing the testimony this morning, and so now I think I really do understand this point about the pre-application necessity of having the telehealth and the other things in the specific building. I want to just make sure that is written as expansively as it possibly can. Obviously, when I first read this bill, I didn't read it carefully, and I thought, a town could be essentially assess all of its buildings and then choose one in which the telehealth facility would occur. Now, from what I'm understanding, that just simply is not possible. That you have to be able to show that the improvement occurs, that the telehealth occurs in the place where these funds are expended. I would just ask for, so it seems as though what this would mean is if we were to try and use the monies, in our town garage, we would have to provide a space for those education telehealth reasons within that actual building. That may just be a complete deal breaker. They're not well set up to administer, in talking to Representative Sabia, which I did at length, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with her about it. It's clear that really all it needs to be is a private room with a door that you can that you can go in and access whatever services are provided online. And that's not a particularly high bar, but I still think that, for a town garage, a town highway department to, deal with people coming in and out of the building and so on and so forth, that's likely to be something that they're just not going to want to deal with. So I don't know. We'll have to discuss that and see whether it's worth the effort. But I just paint that as a picture for you in that regard. There is the possibility. It turns out that this property came with a small house, and there is the possibility that was suggested by the town clerk that we might move that, retrofit that building to serve as the new town lister's office, getting them out of the town office, and that building could probably pretty easily be set up so that it had lister office space, but also had a space for telehealth. Clearly, in that case, to be able to do it, I would certainly argue for higher limits on those grant amounts. I don't know in this case really, but just imagining what would be involved to have a bit more flexibility to be able to include ADA expenses in those kind of projects, especially for the reasons just mentioned, that there's not an obvious source for ADA funds, but to be able to have a slightly larger cap and a slightly more flexibility to include those sort of things might allow us to do that thing. And maybe it's totally not part of the garage, but it's at least, it's in there, and it's essentially achieving the purposes of the bill. What I would just ask in this situation is, what is the definition? It's a little bit hair splitting, but what is the definition of building and the building complex? Like, would it be necessary to make this old house physically attached to the town garage so that then the whole complex could be considered? Or is it possible to say, within a property or a complex or something like that, to have the telehealth facility in one part of it and have the town garage in another part? Anything that could, I'm sure that other towns would be in the same situation of wanting to push that limit as hard as they could and still make it. I obviously appreciate that the towns, that this Treasury is going to go looking at this bill very closely, and they're going to say, well, are you trying to weasel around this rule? I get that. You can't have that happen, but I want to just make sure it's as expansive as it possibly can.
That was the technical term.
Well, thank you for that testimony, and it's, you sound like an experienced person when it comes to definitions and grants.
I have dealt with
precisely what the definitions mean counts for a lot in the end. So, all right. Anything more you'd like us to know about your projects?
No, I think that, I guess what I would say, I was very interested to hear this whole conversation about the assessments. And I'll just tell you that it sounds to me like you're going to run into a real challenge here. The original intention, the governor's intention to have this whole statewide assessment occur and have this whole ranking of projects and targeting of the whole effort is laudable, but it really is going to slow down the rollout of these funds. And to hear that there's now the possibility that existing contractors could be authorized to do these audits and allow that stuff to happen further, faster, is great. I am having a hard time understanding how you would go from that, which is essentially going to be a patchwork quilt of assessments done by different contractors and different people, to get to a comprehensive statewide assessment. I just don't quite see how that can happen. And so I would just ask for this sort of thought that it might be like that there would be an opportunity, a sort of a expedited funding. You could divide this bill into two parts, where you would essentially say towns or municipalities that can present, an urgent need, something that is a clear life safety or property safety issue or something like that, and that they have furthermore had already voted a bond or something, appropriated funds for the replacement of a building, that municipalities in that category would get to go ahead, that they would essentially be allowed to have an expedited path. They can use the assessment system, with any contractor that would do the assessment. And there would be a short window for that, maybe October 1st or something like that, that would allow, towns with these urgent, immediate needs that are essentially shovel-ready projects that would otherwise meet all these other tests to be able to come ahead and get their money. And then essentially you would figure out the total of those projects, and you would subtract it from the total of 40 million. And you would say, okay, now the remainder is going to be appropriated through this statewide process. I expect that the number of towns and communities that would have, that are both have an urgent need that's, life-threatening or property-threatening, and has already voted a bond is a pretty small number. So it wouldn't be a huge impact, but it would have the effect of allowing these immediate projects to go ahead, and so on. So I just asked for that sort of consideration. I'm happy to send you some ideas of how that might get written if that would be any help to you, but I think you get the idea.
Yes, please. If you could, obviously thought about it carefully. If you could write to the committee, we'll share that. We'll share that with everyone in the committee, and we can double back and talk to the people designing, BGS basically, and check in on the concept, share it with them as well. So.
Okay.
All right.
Well, yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. Those are my two concerns. Writing the rule as broadly as is able to be accommodated within the ARPA Treasury rules to accommodate different building configurations and so on and so forth. And then secondly, to allow for an expedited assessment plan. So any further questions for me?
Well, I'm sure Senator McDonald will be keeping an eye out for you.
Okay. Well, he's been doing a great job so far, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks again.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
Sure enough. Thank you, Mark.